And we're live. So we're talking about Danny Masterson, Russell Brand. Asmithlevin is here from Growing Up in Scientology. Obviously, go and follow his channel and all those things. We're live streaming on both channels, so do try and watch both of us if you like us. If you don't, watch neither of us if you don't want to. But Aaron, I wanted to ask you. You obviously were a Scientologist. You know all about it. You know about the Danny Masterson case. He's the guy from that '70s show. The Russell Brand stuff that's come out, has that changed some of the public perception around the Danny Masterson case?
It seems like what it's done is that those who've already been paying attention to the case and understand the nuances and the role that Scientology played in it, it hasn't changed any perception amongst those people. I think what it's done is given a certain group of people an excuse to casually cherry pick a couple poorly interpreted facts relating to the Masterson case and sort of use that as a bludgeon or whatever, or some sort of an example of how the entire system is stacked and corrupt, and it's a conspiracy, and I guess a war against men or something. And you know, Danny Masterson's situation has nothing to do with any of that culture war debate. No matter which side of that debate that you're on, none of that applies to Danny Masterson if you actually understand the facts of the case. Like, I mean, you might have already seen, I've seen people like Matt Walsh and Jake Shields and this girl, I might get her name wrong, Julia Chen, who's like, oh, Danny Masterson was sentenced to 30 years in prison based purely on hearsay of something that happened 20 years ago. And, you know, if you're that like intellectually lazy to think that that actually what happened in this case, I kind of feel bad for you. It seems like
do you want to go into the case just briefly for those, because obviously some people will be so familiar with it because they watch us for Scientology and Danny Masterson stuff, and some people are watching because they've been following the Brand case. Danny Masterson is the actor who was in that '70s show. So what is some of the evidence and what he did? Obviously, we've got to be careful around what words we use on YouTube ridiculously.
Sure. So between 1993 and about 2005, Danny Masterson drugged and assaulted a whole mess of women. I'm saying north of 10. Now, he was facing charges for attacks on 3 of those women that occurred between 2001 and 2003. Now, at the time, all 3 of those women were Scientologists, as was Danny Masterson. In Scientology, it's completely against the rules. It's what they call it a high crime, a suppressive act, to report another Scientologist to the authorities for absolutely anything, even something like what Danny Masterson was convicted of doing. And even though it is against the rules and will get you expelled, Jane Doe 1 actually went to the police in 2004 after she already tried to get justice within Scientology. You know, people not very familiar with Scientology might not understand. When Scientology finds out about some sort of a crime like this, they investigate very, very thoroughly. They do the Scientology version of an interrogation using their kind of little version of a lie detector called the E-meter. These interrogations are thoroughly documented in writing with written notes. Even after the interrogation, the person who's doing the procedure writes up a completely separate independent report of any crimes that were divulged. You'd think that people wouldn't want to put this kind of stuff into writing, but Scientology does. Okay. And in the case of Jane Doe 1 and Danny Masterson admitted to everything that he did. He just didn't think that those details equaled the R word. He didn't deny anything he was being accused of. He just said, yeah, but that's not the R word. And Scientology tried to get him to confront the fact that that's what it was. And he refused to confront that that's what it was. So Jane Doe 1 went to the police. That was in 2004. Now, the only reason that investigation in 2004 didn't move forward to charges is because dozens of Scientologists told the police that they would fill out affidavits calling Jane Doe 1 a liar. Well, that's because it's against the rules to involve the police. Those Scientologists were basically just going to lie in affidavits. The police's hands were tied. They couldn't move forward with anything. Now, what happened is in 2016, when the LAPD learned there were additional victims, the LAPD reopened the original investigation. So this narrative that 3 women came forward 20 years later with unverifiable accusations is entirely false. Not only did the Jane Does, 2 of the Jane Does come forward to the Scientology authorities, but one of the Jane Does specifically came forward to the police. When someone who's, let's say, paying attention to the Russell Brand thing, when they hear that a rich white male actor in Hollywood was sent to prison for 30 years for something he did 20 years ago. Instead of going, oh my God, it's so easy to accuse someone of the R word and get them sent to prison. Instead of concluding that, they should go, wow, there must have been a mountain of evidence in this case. That's incredible. And then actually look into the facts, because there really was a mountain of evidence in this case, despite what some armchair quarterbacks say on Twitter and YouTube.
There's an issue, I think, a very human confirmation bias as well, whereby we hear about one story, then another, and it seems to be a lot of white men. But if you were to see stories about white men who were not being accused of these things, they would be far larger in number. Most white men are not doing this. It is most of any people are not behaving like this, particularly the things that Danny Masterson and Russell Brand have been accused of. These are like outrageous behaviors. That are not like, this is not like, it's getting sort of caught up, I think, in a lot of the cancel culture stuff about somebody said the wrong thing, or they tried to chat up a woman or something and failed, and they were being a bit overly confident. Some of the Russell Brand stuff that we know he did, and I've been getting more flack than I've ever had in the last week or two, and I've reported with you about lots of really controversial stuff, and the Russell Brand stuff has been like crazy. I've been getting some sort of half death threats. I've been getting mad, angry people on both sides as well. Some people saying I haven't gone hard enough on Brand. Some people saying I've gone too hard on him and I'm part of the mainstream media and all this stuff. And it's the maddest thing, because you try and stay in the middle and you can't quite do that. But it is the case that most people are not doing. I mean, even today there was another report on Australia's 60 Minutes. So this woman. So this isn't one of the four main accusers. This is another woman who was working where Russell Brand was going to do a radio show. He comes in and, you know, he's a bit rude and weird, but he goes and starts going into his radio thing. And there's like a window in the radio thing. He sees her walk past and go into the bathroom. A minute later, well, okay, she's then in the bathroom, doors open or whatever, because she's just trying to get something from down somewhere. So she's like kneeling down. Suddenly she feels a presence behind her, turns round, and she's got his crotch in her, like not yet naked or anything. He shuts the door, gets his thing out, and starts trying to slap her with it and saying, you're going to F me and all that. And she's going, no, I am absolutely not going to do that. She has to sort of fight him off. He eventually just goes out, goes on the radio. First thing he does on the radio, starts telling everyone what he just did, and everyone's laughing. He's going, I just got my willy out, and you know what his co-comedian was saying about what he did, and he's laughing, and crazy kind of thing. This is not normal, you know, white elite men. This is not the average person. This is weird stuff. Are there similarities in the way Masterson was behaving? Was he hiding in plain sight to an extent?
Not as in plain sight as Russell Brand is. That's for sure. Like in other words, Russell Brand's entire persona has sort of been this drug addicted sex addict. I think one of the reasons he does get a bit of sympathy from the community at large is I think he's been so transparent about the fact that that's who he is, that at least some of the commentary I've seen from the British folks like yourself, or, you know, not commentary from you, but British folks, is we've known Russell Brand was like this for decades. Y'all are surprised?
Yeah.
And so I think that might be what fuels a little bit of the talking like, oh, it's some coordinated conspiracy, because, you know, a lot of British people are going, wait, we've already known this. Why is this coming up now? Now, I think both of these things could be true. Everything the women are saying happened to them could be true. And at the same time, it could be some sort of media centered conspiracy to take down Russell Brand. Those things are not mutually exclusive. I mean, you can take someone down in a coordinated effort using things they really did. These are not necessarily two opposite sides of an argument. Do you agree with that?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I mean, the culture changed around him, so he was able to get away with these kinds of things. I relate him often to like his behavior and his hiding in plain sight to Jimmy Savile, but I cannot be clearer in that the crimes are of a very, very different severity. That doesn't mean I'm undermining what has happened to these people who have accused him, because some of them are outrageous and shocking and things you shouldn't expect anyone to do. But it's not quite Jimmy Savile. Jimmy Savile is the worst in the world ever. But it was this similar thing of being extremely wealthy, elite, having links to the top people, and sort of this hiding in plain sight. And the reason I asked you, by the way, about Danny Masterson is because of that DJ Donkey Punch was his nickname, wasn't it? And so there was a bit of that, and there was a bit of the sort of interviews with Ashton Kutcher. They were the party guys, weren't they? They sort of played on that.
That's right.
But yeah, with what you're saying, absolutely, there's probably some sort of conspiracy. I mean, this guy was talking out against Big Pharma, some of the biggest companies in the world. He's also a huge problem for TV channels. I look at the BBC, where I've worked before, Channel 4, I imagine it's the same in the States. They're not getting anywhere near the ratings they even were like a year or two ago, let alone 30 or 40 years ago. These channels are absolutely dying. Meanwhile, Brand has got 6 or 7 million subscribers. So of course, the minute that there's a coordinated possibility or a possibility of a coordinated takedown, they're all in on it. Of course, they want to take him down. But as you say, we know, like, aside from those, the things that are being alleged about him, and we have to be careful about that. And Russell Brand strenuously denies those accusations about non-consensual this and that. We know from things he has told us about some of the awful things that he has done. But I actually think I go along with another conspiracy as well, which I think has some truth in it from the other side, which is that Russell has known for some time, and this is going back to what you were saying about the British and Americans having a very, very different idea of Russell Brand, because we knew Russell as this kind of, as you say, sex addicted, crazy guy, and his whole aura was about doing these things. And there was there's a difficulty there, there's a bit of a contradiction, because he was this big lefty kind of feminist who, the way he treated women was such that the BBC had to not hire women to work on his productions. So he's a big sort of lefty champion of the people, and yet women, we know this, were not being allowed to work with him because he was that bad to be around. So what does that? I mean, yeah, go on.
Wow. So it wasn't Russell Brand who was saying don't hire women. It was the BBC that was like, we can't possibly let women get close to you to protect ourselves. Is that what was going on?
Yeah. That was actually going on. That's in that Channel 4 documentary. For people who want to watch that, by the way, it's on my locals, andrewgold.locals.com. You can find that documentary there because it was broadcast in Britain. But absolutely, one of the weirdest things. And this was the BBC in the wake of Savile when that was coming out. And they were like, well, we've got to think about what we're doing. Me Too happened, all of these things. And they were saying all the right things. We're going to start doing things better. And yet internally, all of that time, a little bit like Scientology, they were sort of protecting their man. And all they were doing is going, okay, we'll just make sure no women actually work on productions with him. And they kept promoting him. So the BBC comes out of this looking absolutely awful.
Wow. I think the difference in the American perception of him was sort of that it was all an act, but I don't know. He sort of, for someone who wasn't a rock star, really seemed to just literally have the persona and the life of a rock star.
He was a rock star, yeah.
Where you kind of go, everyone knows what's going on, but because he wasn't a rock star, it seemed like it was just a character he was playing.
Yeah, it was a character, and he got away with that as well. There was a really interesting thing. Again, maybe it's a British outlook as well. The way he spoke, because he has a working class accent. And he has an extraordinary vocabulary. So he was playing on that. Like any English ears will immediately hear working class. And this is a prejudiced way to act, but people are prejudiced. So they would have assumed, okay, this guy's, people would underestimate him. And then he would come out with this extraordinary intelligence and humor, wit and vocabulary. By the way, I've been shouted at for saying things like that because they're saying, oh, you're defending a guy who's done these things. I'm like, I'm not defending him. We have to remember that it's not just horrible, ugly people in the bushes who commit these crimes. It's also extraordinarily charming, intelligent, maybe attractive, rock star-y kinds of guys who do that. It does a disservice to the victims to suggest that it can only be these horrible people who do it, or these stupid people. It can be very, very intelligent guys. So he had that thing, and it did feel like a Dickensian act, some kind of act or whatever. But he went to America, and this was the conspiracy I was going to talk about, was that the idea is that for years he has known this was coming out. He's known for, well, at least 3 or 4 years while the documentaries have been going on, because the documentary makers were asking all of his friends and ex-lovers and things about him. And of course, some of them were on Brand's side, and a lot of people are using that as well and saying, see, these people had experiences with Russell Brand and they were fine. And I'm like, yeah, but people, Fred West didn't kill everybody that was in his entourage. There must be people who could come forward and say, hey, I met Fred West and I had a lovely dinner with him. It doesn't excuse him. But he's known for years. And suddenly he's gone from being this sort of lefty voice of the people, but very, very mainstream, Hollywood, BBC, Channel 4, you do not get more mainstream, selling out huge theatres for his comedy routines. Like, he's just a radio personality, like Mr. Mainstream. Suddenly he's Mr. Anti-Mainstream, big in America, YouTube, conspiracy theories, some of them with some truth in them. I'm not having a go at everything he said. New Age, spiritual, woo-woo, Gwyneth Paltrow stuff. And people are saying he has started his own cult. He's got and friends of his who have spoken to me off the record, but sort of very, quite famous people who knew him, have said they knew from the start this guy has a messianic complex or a messiah complex or whatever it is.
Oh, I think he does.
He got people in his following. He sort of told them over the years, if this ever happens to me, it's the mainstream media lying to me.
Yeah, no, his charismatic way of speaking, the way words just roll off of his tongue, the way he's got a big vocabulary, the way he seems pretty kind of like surgical and insightful. Even in interviews where people usually get a little thrown off. I remember seeing him on was it CNN? There was that show where the woman's name is Mika, and he's destroying them, and they don't even seem to know what to do with him. Like he has all the characteristics of a cult leader. Now, I mean, I've seen the text messages published where he doesn't, between him and one of the women who was abused by him, attacked by him, he's not denying it. He's apologizing. And my point there isn't, oh, he apologized. My point there is he's admitted to these things. I don't know why the jury would be out on whether he really did these things. I mean, is there a large contingency of people who are like, oh, he didn't do it? Or is it mostly he did it, but come on, this is a conspiracy anyway?
Well, people, look, it's confirmation bias. And when you are in a cult, you don't know you're in a cult. And I don't think that just applies to something like Scientology. I think it applies to any kind of thinking, any kind of group you're in and group think, and when you're sort of swayed by people around you. So those people who just follow him no matter what, I tried something called street epistemology on some of those people. It's one of my favorite routines. And you basically say to people, how sure are you out of 10 that he didn't do these things? And if they're saying 10, you probably can't even have a conversation, right? But if they're saying I'm 9 out of 10 sure he didn't do these things, I say, what would it take? What new evidence would have to come out for you to move from a 9 to an 8? And that's all you need, because you're never going to get a 9 to a 1 in like one interaction. You just want to move someone by 1 out of 10, by 10%. You're just moving them along. With that, the specific text messages. So that was with regards to a woman who went to his house, consensually. She consented to going to his house. He had another woman there apparently, and she said, I don't want to be involved in this. You didn't tell me this. This is what you wanted to be involved in. At which point she tried to get away. This is her allegation, and he pushed her against a wall, wouldn't let her go, and the rest is sort of history. And she then left and said these things. Now, firstly, the Times in publishing those messages seem to have made a bit of an error, a glaring error. And this is why we need to look at, attributing blame on all sides here. When you're doing this kind of journalism, you have to be foolproof. It is like 3 years, 4 years in the making. It has to be perfect, especially in a situation where you've got a guy with 7 million, 6 or 7 million subscribers. You've got to make sure everything is perfect, because they're going to look for holes. And they presented on the Times this graphic of the text messages that looks, okay. And then you zoom in on it, and you realize it's been pieced together. And that's not necessarily a problem. It's a very normal way to report on things, because for brevity's sake, you don't want this really long thing. You just want one little graphic. What's the point in having, and by the way, the dog's over there, and it's, none of that's relevant. But the problem is they didn't say that. They didn't make that very clear, apart from a little bit underneath saying graphic by Sunday Times. So we knew it was a graphic that they had mocked up, but it was nowhere near clear enough. They needed to explain to people why they've done that, what has been taken out, and all of these, because you can see that it's been put together, and that was a huge mistake. So a lot of people are saying they've taken it out of context, which is possible, because we now know, so it starts to spread some doubt. And a lot of people are saying that it actually refers to the fact that he didn't wear protection, rather than that he did the R word on her. Now, some people would say that is the R word anyway when you don't wear protection when you're supposed to. But it's still a separate issue. So people are trying to cloud it. So that's what's going on there.
Interesting, I guess. Well, that's where, reasonable doubt comes into play. That's why you can't mess up things like that. You've got to have full disclosure on that. Now, it's interesting because, the Danny Masterson trial is the first trial of its sort I've ever tried to follow. And the fact that there's even any similarity to the Russell Brand thing, for me, it's an interesting sort of study in people's different perceptions of things, because I covered the Danny Masterson thing from the very, very beginning. Like, I already knew the victims were telling the truth. And that's because I know the victims. That's because I know what happened in Scientology. I already know. But someone else couldn't say the same thing. Someone else would have to say, whoa, let's get the facts from both sides. And from some people's perspective, it's going to look like I'm either being more fair or less fair, when really I'm just covering it from my own perception, which is I know the victims and I know what happened in the Scientology world. So, when I look at the Russell Brand thing, I'm not as definitive, obviously. I don't know the victims. I don't know Russell Brand. It's very easy for me to say, let's get all the facts. But some people are offended if you say, let's get all the facts. What do you mean you don't believe the women? I don't believe all of anyone. I don't believe all bald men with beards. I don't believe all my children. I don't believe just because my wife says something doesn't mean I believe it. Like, so I'm all for let's get the facts. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
This is it. So there is we're as a society in a really difficult position, and I've been thinking a lot about this just philosophically. I can't sleep. I'm sitting there at night going like, I wonder what's the thing we should do with our society. We've got 8 billion people in the world. Everybody has a different idea of how the world should go, who should be believed, what we should do in certain cases for justice, and what nobody wants to admit. And I think this is a big part. I obviously, we both have channels about cult dynamics and coercive control and things like that. One of the reasons I think people sometimes join cults or conspiracy theories and things like that is because we cannot deal with uncertainty. Uncertainty in biological evolution meant that you weren't going to get food, you weren't going to find shelter. You needed certainty, and it needed to feel painful to you if there was uncertainty, so that you tried to get some certainty. So that is just like written into our DNA. No more uncertainty. Unfortunately, in a world of 8 billion people, there is a lot of uncertainty. And one of the problems is justice, right? How do you sort out justice for crimes unless you have more cameras and things? You put more cameras, and then you've got an authoritarian state. You can't have that, just cameras in everybody's bedrooms. So with the R word in particular, the evidence is so hard to get. Now, people will start saying, yes, oh, what do you mean? You can go and get a kit, which is what one of the women did. She went to a clinic, got a kit. All that really shows us is there was force or not. But who knows whether that was consensual, So then you end up in a situation where either you believe the women without 100% knowing and put somebody in prison. That's not a great situation. Or you have a situation where you don't believe the women and you discourage other women in future from coming forward about impossibly difficult circumstances. Why would they ever come forward if they're going to start being, oh, you're lying and all these kinds of things? And sometimes I think as a society, it would help if we just, not that this helps with justice, but it would help us to just go, oh my God, I don't know what to do here. This is a really difficult situation. So the best we've got really is something called, I think it's Blackstone's ratio. I've been talking about that a lot this week. Yeah, Blackstone's ratio. And he was this law guy from back in the day. And he was saying for every 10 guilty person, there can be one innocent person who goes to prison. Right? It's okay, because when you're not sure, you've got to sort of make a society where you're pretty sure, but unfortunately one innocent person will go to prison. Now, Benjamin Franklin later changed that to, he said a society should have, better that 100 people go free who are guilty than one innocent person go to prison. Now, the level of the statistics around false accusations are extremely low when taken into context. But still, you've got one person who's been falsely accused and spends the rest of their life in prison. So there's no real good way out of this, except all we can do is look at how the 4 women who are official, and there's like 12 women now if you take into account a lot of other stories from the past. The Daily Mail have put out quite a few of them. A lot of the newspapers are telling various different stories. But how are they corroborated? For example, Brand's, a few of them spoke about Brand's eyes just turning black and him completely changing, something like that. That's one of the ways. You've got the kit that one of them got. One of the instances is not actually necessarily about a forceful action. It's about what he did with a 16-year-old girl. 16 is apparently legal in the UK, but it's a bit more complicated than that, because if there's any kind of guardianship or any proof of some kind of relationship, such as a teacher, something like that, then 16 is not okay when Brand was in his 30s. But we can then judge. We can still say, like, yeah, but that's a bit odd that he's in his 30s doing this with a 16-year-old and trying to tear her away from her mother. This is what we've been hearing, and trying to, in a very cultish way, draw a line between the mother and the 16-year-old daughter. These are things that long ago we said as a society are not acceptable. So I don't know.
I didn't know that quote was from Benjamin Franklin, but that is the exact quote that I was going to mention when I say, we have this idea of what is justice. I personally come down on the side of, I would rather have 100 guilty people walk free than one innocent person sent to prison. Now, and I think that's kind of a personal bias everyone's going to have, where they fall, where they come down on that argument. But the idea of someone actually going to prison for decades, sometimes life, for something they actually didn't do, to me, is the stuff of nightmares that I think it should, the standard of evidence should be high. It should be hard to prove claims that are decades old. It is hard to prove claims that are decades old. That's one of the reasons why when people look at the Danny Masterson case, they should go, what was the evidence? Let me look into that, because Danny Masterson's case is not a case of someone just casually being sent to prison just based on some words that some women said. That's just not the case. What
was the court able to see the Scientology auditing reports?
The auditing reports themselves are confidential, but there's reports written after the auditing reports. And in this particular case, what happened is the Jane Doe and her mother had gotten had some copies of these reports. And based on what was in the report, Jane Doe one's mother sent a letter to Scientology's International Justice Chief. And when she didn't get the response that she liked, she sent a letter directly to David Miscavige. And the fact is, David Miscavige personally intervened in this case to help, sort some things out. So there was so much written documentation, and the written documentation was from 20 years ago. So when anyone just says, oh, there was no evidence, there was so much evidence. There was so much evidence. And there was also corroborating witnesses. People was like, yes, this person came to me and said that this happened. And the jury has to decide whether these people are believable. They were immensely believable. So, in Russell Brand's case, I think he has, am I overstating it? He has all but admitted. Okay, here's one similarity to the Danny Masterson thing. Danny admitted to the acts he was being accused of, but wouldn't admit that it was, and I think at this point in the video we can say rape. He goes, that's not rape. At this point in the video we can say that. At least on my channel we can.
Not too many times, but yeah.
Okay. In Russell Brand's case, I have not heard what his response has been to those text messages. Is he saying none of that happened? That's not real. Those are just manufactured. What's he saying?
He's had so far, he's spoken twice. Now, the first time he spoke was before the documentary and the article in the Times. So that's how this unfolded. Basically, a week ago, how this always happens somehow is somebody who knows somebody at a newspaper or TV channel says, big allegations are coming out this weekend. And everybody starts then guessing and speculating on Twitter, particularly in the UK, because we knew it was a British comedian. That's what we all knew. We're going, who is it? Is it a group of comedians? And there are, at the moment, huge accusations about other comedians, and they have not yet been named. But the police officer, the detective, who was the one responsible for the Jimmy Savile case, has been placed in charge of the Russell Brand case now, and is getting more accusers coming forward to him. And he said there are also 2 other celebrities in the UK at the moment who are getting accusations, and we are looking into them. So there's rumors the whole time that those are coming out. So this is the timeline of it. Those rumors spread around Twitter. Someone, something, somewhere. Russell Brand's name was obviously one of the first. The funny thing is here, alluding again to what you were saying before about the British being like, well, we knew this, was that everybody was saying, well, it can't be Russell Brand because everybody's saying these are like explosive bombshell allegations, and everybody already knows this. But this is like the most open, in plain sight secret of all time. So it couldn't possibly be Russell Brand if it's such a big deal. People were almost disappointed when they found out it was him, because it was just like, oh, Okay, well, tell me something I don't know. But okay, that's a general feeling I've got about Brand, of course. So then I'm thinking, oh, I better keep an eye on this because this is what, my subscribers want to know about these kinds of things. This is important. It's big news. There's the whole thing. I wonder who it is. And it was like nearly midnight. I was feeling a bit under the weather. I was in the bath, right, with some bubble, salts and things, having a nice time before going, thinking I'll go to sleep in a minute, all tired, half asleep. And I got a message on my phone. It's Russell Brand. So I have to jump out the bath, run over to my thing and start looking, and then before going live, because you just got to react to that if you're doing news and things like that. Anyway, so that was the first time we knew it was Russell Brand. Russell then gave out this whole sort of minute and a half long speech about, look, a TV channel has been in touch, a newspaper's been in touch, because you have something called right of reply. It's an ethical thing. I don't know if it's legal necessarily, but I think it's an ethical thing that TV stations and newspapers have to do. They give a right of reply. I've done that when I've made documentaries. I made one for the BBC. I had to send a list of allegations to an exorcist of the things I was accusing him of in the documentary, and then he just wrote back like horrible, angry stuff. Now, Russell didn't play their game, because they wanted, I imagine, to put right at the bottom of their news article, which was huge, by the way. The article in the Times, you'd spend a whole day having to scroll down just to get to the bottom of it. It was like so much stuff on every woman and what they've said about Russell Brand. And they would have probably had something in italics at the bottom. Russell, by the way, this is how he responds. That's what they wanted to do. Maybe in the documentary, like at the end, by the way, Russell doesn't agree. But Russell's thinking, well, I've got more subscribers than Channel 4, probably. I haven't actually checked that, but I get more viewers than Channel 4. I get more than the Times, all of these things. So I'm going to just go live and say it and just deny everything, not play their game, and say that there are dark conspiracies against me, which plays into the whole conspiratorial thing. So that was the one time he spoke out, and then he spoke again I think it was yesterday or the day before. It's all just muddled in my head. And it was a similar video where this time he pointed to something called the surveillance bill, which is being introduced in the UK. It is concerning, and it gives the government more rights to look into what we are messaging to one another. Now, my initial reaction was, maybe, like you were saying before, fair point. Like, it doesn't mean Russell hasn't done these things, but this might be part of the whole thing of like people wanting to spy on messages, people wanting to find out more about Russell and to distract from the fact that this bill was being introduced. Maybe there is some truth in that. I have since seen that apparently this surveillance bill has very little to do with what's going on with Russell Brand and his conspiracies and things. But yesterday or the day before, that video he put out, he was saying on Monday, which is tomorrow at the time of speaking, he's going to go live on Rumble and talk about all of the surveillance bills and stuff like that. But he didn't speak about the text messages or the allegations. He's probably been told by his lawyers. But his lawyers, it is worth just stating, have been incredibly strong over the last 2 decades. Whenever people have come forward with any kind of allegation, they have gone for those people. So he's been heavily protected by lawyers for quite some time, and who knows what's going to happen in the next few days.
I think one of the things that the media does, and it's not entirely accurate to use the word media to refer to all journalists, but I just don't know how else, to talk about these things, is in some cases when they're talking about women's issues and wanting to support, women and autonomy, and when we're talking about Russell Brand stuff, this is just an example. Sex work is real work is something, a message that gets pushed when they're wanting to support women and women autonomy. But then and I know this isn't what Russell Brand is accused of, but it's just maybe a careless example, but sex work is real work, but visiting sex workers is supporting human trafficking. And you go, which one is it? Which one? It feels like when the media wants to support, women autonomy, the message is one thing. When they want to, embarrass a famous person, the message changes. Or you mentioned that the age of consent in the UK is 16. I'll take your word on that because I don't know. And you go, okay, well, if that means they're a legal adult and they're their own person and they have autonomy and they should, be given all the rights, but then you infantilize them when you try to smear an older person for having a relationship with them. And you go, well, are they an adult in the eyes of the law or are they not? Which one is it? You can't. Why do you want to have it both ways? And I think this is something the media does, because I saw someone in the chat that was like, well, what would the media conspiracy here be really? And I don't know precisely the answer to that question, but what comes to mind is on some issues, the media wants to be like, support all women, and 18 years old, you're an adult, you can do whatever you want, and for example, sex work is real work, and then you go, okay, but then the same publication will be like I said, visiting sex workers is human trafficking, and it's disgusting to have a relationship with an 18-year-old. In the U.S., it would be an 18-year-old or a 16-year-old, and you go, but which one is it? You've got to pick a lane and be consistent, or it looks like you're just trying to take people down. You're not actually standing on principle. You're standing on whatever you think will generate the most outrage. That's just what I see happening in the media sometimes.
Well, look, that's definitely the case. At the end of the day, the media just want to sell stories. That's it, and that's quite simple. It's a simple thing they want to do, and we sometimes reach for these bigger conspiracies because it makes us feel clever. It makes us feel that people are in charge as well. That's one of the main reasons people go for conspiracy theories, because again, the alternative is uncertainty. The alternative is nobody at the top really knows what they're doing. It's actually nicer and easier for us to sometimes believe there are all these dark forces at the top pulling like puppet strings and things like that. And that, okay, so Russell's been taken down. It must be because of all these dark people who have invented the stories and done this and that. And look, I'm not going to count any of that stuff out. That is possible. But sometimes the simplest solution is just the correct one. And it is literally there's some people at a TV channel, some people at a newspaper know they will get a lot of clicks, a lot of, and that means a lot of advertising revenue, a lot of money. Now you can take that further and start looking at what else is going on here. And there are some really scary things going on. The scariest for me was the chair of the culture something and sports, media and sports parliament, it's part of the government, Dame Caroline Dinenage, has come out sending, it's been outed that she has been sending these weird messages to YouTube, to Rumble, to various different TV channels and newspapers and things saying, hey, I've noticed that Russell's on your platform. What's the deal with that? He's got these allegations, blah, 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 blah. And you're like, you're a politician. What the hell are you doing getting involved? That is just going to fan the flames of conspiracy. YouTube took away his monetization already. And it just showed how little this particular politician knows about the media. She is the chair of media. She should know about YouTube, Rumble, all the things that me and you do know about because it's our jobs. And in her message to Rumble, which for anyone who doesn't know is the alternative to YouTube, it's like the cancel culture, one that, uncancelable. That's their whole message. And I'm on Rumble. Are you on Rumble, Aaron?
I have the thing where everything I upload to my channel automatically uploads to Rumble.
That's what I have.
The audience is like almost non-existent.
That's why I'd never even bother with it. It's unfortunately at the moment it's not a very usable platform. The interface is nowhere near as nice as YouTube's and things like that. But it's okay. It is what it is, and we auto sync to it. But in her message to Rumble, Caroline Dinenage actually used YouTube as an example, like basically saying like, "Are you going to follow in YouTube's footsteps?" Blah 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 blah, and cancel Russell. And it was like, do you know who you're talking to? These guys are the anti-YouTube. They are not going to be convinced by you saying like, "Hey, YouTube's done it. Are you going to do it too?" She doesn't even know, and it just shows how far these politicians are away from actually understanding real life. But that also speaks against the conspiracy that these are like super smart people going, aha, we're going to take Russell down. They don't know what they're doing. They don't know.
It's true. I tend not to go in for, it's so hard to keep anything as like the idea of grand conspiracies for me tend to fall away when you look at them. And I'm not saying there is a media conspiracy against Russell Brand. What my thought on that is, even if there were, it doesn't, where I come down on it is it doesn't negate the truth, or it doesn't negate the potential truth of the allegations. Like I wouldn't even care if it was a media conspiracy. I would care, are the accusations true or not? I'll tell you, I read that thing about the government official in the UK, demanding he be either deplatformed or demonetized. And my first thought was, what the hell? But you guys over in the UK don't exactly have the same type of freedom of speech that we have in the US. So I didn't know if that was normal for you guys.
No, it's an odd, I don't think anyone knows why she's getting involved. I suppose my feeling is, and again, I know people think there's bigger conspiracies at play. I'm sure there are some bits. Maybe it is possible. She has had like little messages from people who have supported her. There do seem to be some links in her goings on. I don't want to go too much into it because I don't actually understand the full ins and outs related to YouTube. There has been some money put into her bank account from Google. That might all be above, might be okay. But she maybe a little message here and there like, hey, are you going to tell Rumble to get rid of Russell? Because without Russell, Rumble, he's like their big star. He's the guy on Rumble. Oh yeah, yeah. Russell Brand's like
know
the
that.
big star of Rumble, and he will be getting paid outside of the money he makes on Rumble to be that guy. I would imagine. I'm alleging that. I'm speculating. I would be very surprised if they haven't paid him a good deal of money
Well,
to
they
basically
must be
be the
because
face.
he declined to upload to Twitter, so they have to be paying him for exclusivity.
That's it. That's it.
Yeah.
I think so as well. I think that. So that's the awkward thing. So
I got to
free
tell you,
speech.
Andrew, the whole thing. I'm sorry to interrupt, but the whole thing of YouTube demonetizing him just because there's accusations, I find that to be completely outrageous. The thing I compare that to is I know there's some law that we have here in the United States that like a convicted felon is not allowed to monetize their conviction. Like they can't be there in prison making money selling a book like I did it. And that's the only thing
OJ.
I can even exactly. That's the only thing I can even compare this to. And I go, but he's not doing videos about it. Like you said, he's doing videos, but not about this. I honestly cannot even believe that YouTube stepped in and said, we are going to demonetize your channel because you have accusations against you. I find it completely outrageous. And things like that fuel the conspiracy theorists and fuel the culture warriors and fuel the war against men contingent. And it's things like that that then cause people to go selectively cherry pick facts from the Danny Masterson case and almost use Danny Masterson as their new champion of injustice or something. You know what I mean? It's horrible.
How would we have felt though if, and it's an interesting question, until the actual conviction of Danny Masterson, if he had been a big YouTuber with 7 million subscribers by that point, not necessarily talking about the crimes themselves and profiting from that, but talking about wider conspiracies that in an indirect way supports his case.
You know, that's no, I would not have supported in that hypothetical situation, a channel that Danny had being demonetized. No way. Look, if people can watch it, they don't want to watch. Advertisers can choose to advertise or not advertise. But for YouTube to say, no, you're not even eligible. What if there's people who want to advertise on that channel? Like, that's absolutely outrageous. The whole concept I find very troubling.
It's a weird thing, actually. I'm just thinking out loud because I've been going on about how troubling I find it as well. I think it's ridiculous. But I also know that like the reason we've had issues with YouTube in the past is because of something called the adpocalypse, which apparently happened about 3 or 4 times, where basically the brands got together, spoke to YouTube and said, we are not happy with our brands being put next to all of this weird material. Now, the problem is YouTube then has to try and monitor and be the moral arbiter of like 10 million YouTube users at once, which is impossible. So they have to use algorithms and machine learning, which is never right, never knows the right context that we're using like these bad words. And for example, we can't use the R word. Like the people who do those horrible things very rarely use that word. So it's not like we're the, you know, like again, there's an N word I try not to use for German, the German, not that N word, but the N word for, I try not to use the N word when I can. But with regards to 1930s Germany, I won't even use that because I got in so much trouble. I got in trouble for that. And my channel got a warning and I had to say to them, those people from like those neo-ns don't use that word because they say like, oh, we're fine. We're just great. They're not calling themselves that. The only people who would use that word are the ones talking badly about those people. But so YouTube's a mess basically. And the advertisers, they're saying, look, if you can't really get into the nuances of what people are saying, we're just going to have to make it much more, difficult for your creators to actually say anything interesting, which is, we're trying, we're doing our best. But yeah, so the point being here, I've forgotten my point, Aaron.
That's okay. I can follow on. The viewers might have no idea. One of the things that's crazy about the YouTube censorship is that when their algorithm dings one of your videos and they demonetize your video, not your channel, they don't even give you the timestamps for our algorithm detected something between this time and this time that's violated. Not only do they not tell you the violation, they don't even tell you where in your video the violation occurred. And you guys might know we're currently live streaming to both my channel and Andrew's channel, which I do with a whole bunch of other creators. In so many cases, the exact same video will be demonetized on one channel, but not the other channel. This is why people lose their minds on the demonetization. I have an even more radical opinion on the apocalypse. Like I remember a specific example that came up is like there were certain can we say Taliban? Can we say that word?
Oh my God. I think they're going to knock on my door in a minute, the YouTube authorities.
Let me see if YouTube has already demonetized the live stream. Hold on. I don't think so.
I'll look on my side. I bet
I'm
mine
still
has.
good. I'm still good.
It'll be, call them Teletubbies. That would do.
Teletubbies. So I think some brands were complaining that their ads were showing up on videos of Teletubbies. And I'm thinking to myself, guys, people go on the internet and they go down some really deep holes at 3 o'clock in the morning. Okay. Those people still buy Hershey's candy bars and they still buy Dove soap. I don't see what the problem is with having ads on those videos. Are people, everyone's a consumer. Like, I feel like the adpocalypse outrage was manufactured. I don't trust what we were told about that.
People on Twitter and stuff may be going like, I won't buy things. It was on a video of this horrible thing or whatever. Look, it's a compromising position because brands, their whole thing is not being, you know, they get sponsors. They sponsor people. They want a handsome or a beautiful person. They want to sponsor Russell Brand. All his sponsors have pulled out, by the way, as well. He has other sponsors, which, by the way, is a kick in the teeth for those who are supporting the conspiracy theory that he is this anti-mainstream guy. I can't remember the names now of the sponsors, but they're like super mainstream sponsors who have been sponsoring him for years. He can't be just this guy who's like super far left or far right, who's outside of the mainstream. He's just been in like Hollywood movies. Like last year he was in, what's that yellow little, not the Simpsons, but it's like the Munchkins or something. What are they? They're all little yellow things. They're called like something. The yellow Russell Brand yellow things. But this is it. So, look, some brands might say, I put Russell Brand yellow and nothing's come up, obviously. Brands might say, I don't want to be associated with Russell Brand. I don't want to be involved with him now that he's done these things, and it puts YouTube, I suppose, in a difficult position. But for them to come out and sort of virtue signal by saying, you know, we're not going to, all they're saying to us really is we're not going to wait for due process and to wait to see what the law says. The other thing is they used the word, I was looking at the way they worded it, and they kept using words like this doesn't fit into the YouTube ecosystem. And I think they sort of, you know, they revealed more than they meant to with the word ecosystem, because ecosystem implies there's a hierarchy, and it means YouTube is at the top with their advertisers, and the rest of us creators and the viewers are right at the bottom. And that's what they were showing us with that word. And it shows how disposable that we all are to them. And that's why you and me, even more than just because of free speech, that you and me don't like this, because it could happen to us for any kind of accusation. It's one thing to have your name dragged through the press, to have people speculating about whether you did things or not, awful stuff. But to not even be able to put our own work and to get money for the work we've already done on this platform, that's just, what do you want to do? Just squeeze everything out of him until the court case, and then what if he's innocent in the court case?
Yeah, exactly. Now look, if Russell Brand was up there doing videos talking about the case, smack talking the accusers, and I was YouTube, I'd be like, no bro, we're not doing that. But he's talking, I'm assuming he's talking about the same political, social stuff that he's been talking about for years, and for them to be like, and also, oh, look, this is a deep fear a lot of people have. Someone can just come in and be like, you can't support your family. Now, I'm sure Russell Brand is rich. He doesn't, he's not worrying about where his next mortgage payment is coming from. But I think people who aren't in that situation look at the fact that this platform can just flip a switch and go, nope, you're out. You're out.
Yeah.
When usually that kind of action is reserved for once someone is convicted beyond a reasonable doubt in a court of law by a jury of their peers. And now it's just done by the latest CEO of YouTube. And that can be terrifying. For the record, I without knowing all the people involved, I absolutely believe Russell Brand's victims. I have no reason not to, just based on what I've already seen. That doesn't necessarily conflict with saying, well, he's not been accused or charged and tried. That's fine. I don't think Russell Brand should be canceled, but I still believe his victims. I think until he's has he even been charged with anything?
No, it's in police investigations at the moment.
Right. So, you know, I know I'm going to start repeating myself eventually. It should be difficult. There should be a high bar, a high evidentiary standard to convict someone of crimes like this for society's sake. And yet I do say I find what I have read so far, I find credible. But I've also said I'm someone who's very easily convinced by a very good argument. I'll watch a documentary and I go, everyone needs to see this. And then I'll see the documentary debunking the first documentary and I'll go, everybody needs to see this, you know?
Yeah.
So I'm someone who's easily convinced. What I've seen so far, I find convincing. Do you find it convincing? What's been revealed so far?
Yeah. I mean, there's two things going on again that I don't. Again, we grapple with this and find it really difficult. There's one: is he going to be guilty in the court of law? The other thing is, has he done things that take advantage of a power imbalance, and are pretty awful, and are things that we as a society should not put up with, particularly from people who are earning loads of money from being on big mainstream TV channels and movies and things. So it depends what people are saying. Now, if we are just looking at, is he guilty of the 4 accusations from the 4 women? I don't even want to speculate. But as you say, I have no reason not to believe those women. We know that he was in a relationship with this 16-year-old. She believes she was coerced to such an extent that it constitutes R, or whatever it might be. The 3 others tell stories of awful things. One of them has the text messages and a kit from the criminal case, from the clinic. I mean, why would she go and get a clinic thing and get it frozen and all of that stuff? But then we've just got, like I was saying at the beginning, loads of stuff which might not constitute R, like this woman that he went into the bathroom with, closed the door, got his appendage out. I'm being fruity with my language here, but he got his appendage out and put it in her face. And a lot of people just go to me, that's not illegal. And it's like, well, are you doing that at work? Or if you came home from work and you went, weird thing happened today in the bathroom. My boss went and did this to Susie. And you go, what? And you'd probably get the police involved. But somehow, because it's Brand, a lot of people are going, oh, well, that's... And here's another thing to think about. And I've said this a few times on my channel, but I don't know what people will say. And it's a very controversial thing to say. But there is another option here, because I think a lot of people don't want to believe he did it, don't want to admit it, want to think there's a conspiracy because they like Russell Brand. I like Russell Brand as well. I find him funny and intelligent, but I also think he probably did these awful things. The thing is, and I've said this before, you are allowed to not care. We're not here, Aaron and I are not here telling you you're a bad person if you don't care. You're allowed to go, gosh, he did such bad things, but I find him funny anyway and I don't care. I'm not there to go around judging you in your house for things you've not got a moral conscience for, because I'm sure I also failed to live up to certain moral standards. They were awful. I said the other day on YouTube, look, what would you rather? Would you rather you had to get both your legs cut off, or 10 people on the other side of the world would just die? You could keep your legs, but 10 people you've never met would die, right? Because we're not so morally upstanding. We're quite selfish.
10 people going to die.
Yeah, well, that's it. I did a 1 and 2 thing, and it was 90% of people were saying, I might let those people die. Some people wouldn't, and that's great, but I'm sure they fail in some other moral standing. It's okay to still want to watch Russell Brand, to still love him and not care that he did. You could even say, because he's reformed, and I don't think it's worth putting him in prison now. He's a nice guy now. That's fine. But that doesn't mean you have to disbelieve these women who have come forward, because it's just too much, I think. That's just my personal belief.
I agree. Also, there's something that I like to, I don't know, say sometimes. Just people go, innocent until proven guilty. Guys, that's the standard for the government. Just because you're found innocent doesn't mean you didn't do it. And just because you're found guilty doesn't mean you did it. Everyone needs to evaluate the facts for themselves if it's an issue they care about, and make up their mind for themselves. A jury is not making up my mind for me. A judge is not making up my mind for me. It's their job to make that decision in that case for that person. That does not establish the absolute truth or falsity of a situation. So it's okay. Even innocent until proven guilty. Not necessarily. If he's guilty, if he's found guilty in 6 months, he was guilty 6 months ago. Guilty is guilty, right? Yeah. So we have to make up our minds for ourselves. He's innocent in the eyes of the law until he's proven guilty in the eyes of the law. The truth is, a private company can cancel him if they think it's going to hurt their stock price, or if just their public relations, or whatever. And so,
Rumble's stock price did take a hit in the last few days, and so I think they're just going to try and stick it out with him, and maybe it'll rise again. But it went down 15% in just a few days with Russell's allegations. So they're in a really difficult position, because they can't then be well, we're going to cancel him, because no, the whole point of Rumble is you don't cancel people. So if they now cancel him, they're going to go down even more. Whereas if they keep him, they go down. So they're in a very difficult position right now. They will be hurting from this. But I think one of the points that you're making I find really interesting, and it's slogans. And slogans are obviously a huge part of cults, of politics. It's a way of getting a huge population to not think for themselves. And Russell uses them himself, be free, be free. And we all do them from time to time. We use these different kinds of slogans and things. They are very effective at convincing people, but they don't often mean that much when you hold them up to the light. So innocent until proven guilty means a very specific thing with regards to whether that person should actually go to prison and whether we can take away their liberty to walk around anymore. It's really, really specific. It doesn't mean necessarily that person is innocent. It just means in that specific scenario. So then we talked about believe all women. That just doesn't require you to think anymore. You can be like, well, this is my tribe and we're all saying this thing, so we're just going to keep saying it and not really think about what that means. It doesn't mean, do you believe all women when they're pressing charges against other women? Which women do you believe then? There must be plenty of cases where that's the case. So another one is trial by media, that a lot of people who are defending Russell Brand right now keep saying. Trial by media, it's just a trial by media. It's a frenzy. It's a circus, a media circus. The media is basically the last bastion of accountability. The media is supposed to do these things because without the media, I'm willing to wager Danny Masterson would still be at large. I don't know that for sure, but Bill Cosby, Jimmy Savile, obviously he died before it all came to light, but the media were the ones that were going after these stories because it was not because the media are so wonderful and great, but because they would get money from doing these stories. They were incentivized to find the stories. So a trial by media can be bad. It doesn't mean that person should go to prison. But when we're talking about a 4-year-long research into a documentary and articles, and these people at the TV channels know they will be sued to oblivion if they get anything wrong, that's pretty good evidence. You know, it's not everything. Doesn't mean you take away their liberty. It's why we both think that YouTube went too far in taking away Brand's right to earn money. But we're still allowed to go, gosh, that's pretty convincing evidence. I don't need to wait for a jury or just to say trial by media and not think for myself. So I just think those slogans are things we've got to be careful of. You know, from your own experience in Scientology, slogans are quite a big part of it, isn't it? Am I right in saying that?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I was speaking with a woman recently who said to her, what believe all women meant was when a woman says she's been the victim of one of these violent crimes, care enough to believe it enough to look into it instead of just having, it's almost like the opposite of believe all women is women are just lying. Yeah. And to her, what it meant was, believe them enough to take it seriously and look into it. And now I tend to go, if you have to explain to people what your slogan really means, then there's a problem with your slogan. But that's fine. I mean, we're the ones who are mentioning believe all women. I don't know that that's the thing here. You know, there's something I just realized I didn't know. Are these accusations coming exclusively right now from women in the UK, or are these women in the US as well?
No, US and Australia as well.
Wow. Which a government or seems to actually be investigating? Is it the UK government?
I'm not 100% about but I'm pretty sure the LAP, what would it be? The LAPD, the LA District Attorney, something like that. It's all stuff that's foreign to me, but I have heard that they are currently investigating. And then there is Jimmy Savile's detective who is in Britain investigating. 60 Minutes Australia just released a piece with an Australian woman, the one who was in the bathroom with him. But that may have taken place in LA. So a lot of these things, I mean, if you read that Times article, Russell Brand's thing, I might have to give you my username or something for you to read it because you have to sign up to it. But it's like outrageously long. So it is very difficult to keep up with what happened exactly where. And because the women are all keeping their anonymity as well, it's really, really complex. So my understanding is that some sort of district in LA is looking into this right now, investigating. And also Scotland Yard, which is like the British police, are looking into this.
Yeah. Guys, I think if you don't believe Russell Brand's victims, it's because you don't like Russell Brand or you just don't want to believe the victims. That's my personal opinion, and that's okay.
Because you do like Russell Brand, you mean?
I actually do like. Oh wait. Oh right. Because you do like Russell Brand. I really like Russell Brand.
I got in a lot of trouble for saying that. Be careful.
I absolutely believe these. I don't. This is Russell Brand. This is who he's been telling us he is for 25 years. This is not strain belief. He is really an incredibly talented performer and extremely funny. I also believe the women who are saying that these things happen. That's okay.
Yeah. I got in a lot of trouble for saying that early on. the thing is, like, something I've always learned with trying to sort of de-radicalize people, I suppose. And the thing is, a lot of people loved Russell Brand. He had 7 million subscribers, or he still does, 6.5, 7 million subscribers. And a lot of those people are very normal people or whatever, but obviously the extremes are going to be pretty caught up in what he's doing at the moment. And I don't think it's going over the top to suggest a sort of cult thing with the cult of Russell Brand. I mean, we look at Scientology, we talk about how awful it is and this how it breaks up families, it bankrupts people, it does these awful abuses. What is it, 30,000 people around the world in Scientology?
Oh, at the most, yeah.
Yeah, they try to exaggerate it. We know Russell Brand has 6 or 7 million on YouTube. He's got dozens of millions in different in Instagram, TikTok. He's huge on Locals, where he's getting a lot of members who support his work and stuff like that. We're talking about a guy with probably 10, 20 million people who hang on his every word compared to 30,000 of Scientology. That doesn't make Russell Brand a dangerous cult or anything like that, but it does mean that a lot of people are going to be really caught up in what he's saying. And when you're trying, I think, to de-radicalize people or to make them aware that they're in a cult and things like that, I mean, you've had first-hand experience of how difficult that is, I imagine. You must have tried to get some people out of Scientology.
Oh, it's almost impossible. It's almost impossible to convince someone who's a believer that they are, well, I was going to say in a cult. I mean, specifically, that's true to Scientology. I would say Russell Brand's following is probably cult-like. I don't claim to be an expert on what would officially make it a cult, but it's almost impossible. Like, people ask me, is there anything someone could have said to you or done or gotten you to believe when you were a hardcore believer in Scientology that would have gotten you to reconsider anything you already believed to be true? I said, no, not at all. Not at all.
Wow.
With David Miscavige beating people, I would not have cared if I thought David Miscavige was beating people. Honestly, there's something to be said for that prison of belief.
It's incredible. It's incredible. Well, and I know firsthand, I remember one interview I did that stuck with me was a guy called Jesse Morton, who used to be, let's call them the Teletubbies we were talking about before, those people who do horrible things. So giving a cute name to the most evil people ever, but who he used to do those awful things. Jesse, I hope people are clear on what I'm talking about with the Teletubbies, but he supplied the ingredients and inspired what happened at that Boston Marathon. So he was a big part of that, was in prison, was radicalized, and all of these kinds of things. Eventually, he turned and he started his job, his life was dedicated to talking people down. And he said the only way he could even get near was a little bit similar to what I was saying before about getting someone from a 9 out of 10 down to an 8 out of 10 or something like that. He had to go in and meet these people and pretend he was still one of them. And all he could really do, he couldn't convince them not to believe the things they believed, but he could make them less violent. He could say, I believe exactly the same. I agree with you that America and the West is awful, blah, blah, blah. However, if we go to violence, we are as bad as them. He had to go in from their side and just talk them down one level. That's the best you can really hope for. So when I went about approaching this, my thinking here is like, I respect a lot the people who do support Russell Brand in this, no matter what, the people who do believe the conspiracy theories and things like that. I mean, they make up a good 25, 30% of my audience, I have respect for those people. And I'm not just going to get on here and just start shouting, oh, he definitely did it, no matter what, because that's not going to help. It's just going to push those people away, and they're just going to go and follow other people who are much darker, who are not going to look at the nuance in between, and they're just going to become more and more convinced in their thinking. So the only way to go about it is to admit some of the things that are true, but that maybe if we were a little bit less brave, maybe we wouldn't admit, which is, I quite like Russell Brand. I find him funny. Even since all the allegations, I've sort of been ashamed to find myself listening to a few things he said from the past and almost laughing and going, oh, I better stop myself. I do think he's really clever. And people, when I've said that, people on the other side have gone mad at me. And they've gone, unsubscribing, 1 star, you're an art apologist, you're this, you're that. And I'm like, I'm actually trying to do something here. I'm trying to show both sides and to show these people that I'm on their side. I think he's great as well. But I think the balance of probabilities, I think he did these things.
Yes. I have to admit, I'm probably despite everything I've said, I think Russell Brand is a talented performer. I think his accusers are telling the truth. I probably more come down in the I don't care camp. Like, this does not affect my life in any way. The Danny Masterson thing I cared about deeply. I was born and raised in Scientology. I know the victims. I know the people in Scientology who silenced the victims. It's deeply important to me. I don't give a damn about Russell Brand. Even though
Yeah.
I would have called myself a Russell Brand fan. I still don't give a damn about him. I don't know.
Yeah.
Does that sound funny, or does that sound? Oh, my light went out. Be back.
It's a conspiracy. Russell went and got his light and turned it off. He doesn't want him speaking out about it. No, look, I think what Aaron's just saying there is really important to say. I think the whole point of me and you, right? I've been thinking about this. The whole point of Aaron and me, not I. Yes, the point of Aaron and me. The whole point of Aaron and me and people like us is to not just parrot the same boring stuff that you hear on TV where everybody is so careful all the time. But if you guys want us to be like that, we need the more extreme of you to not keep going in so hard on us when we say things like that. It's important that we be honest. I've got a book coming out next year. I'm not saying this in a promoting way because it's way too early, so don't worry about it, anyone. But the book is about secrecy and things like that. And I did loads of surveys about what people are really like at home and what they are like on social media and things like that and publicly. And we are so different. And it's really difficult because it promotes a lot of shame in us, because you go on Instagram, you see all these people not only who look and seem amazing with all their money and their cars and their amazing stuff and they're so great and everything, but they also seem to have really righteous and virtuous views about things, and they're just such lovely ones. And then you just think, but I don't know if I actually care about those 10 people in that country on the other side of the world who are being killed so I can keep my legs. I don't know if I actually care about. Do I really? Don't I? The fact is, humans don't have the capability to care. We grew up in tribes of like 70. It eventually got to about 130. And you just don't have the mental capacity to care that much about everything that happens around the world all the time. And I think it's important for Aaron and I to be honest and just say that, because people need to feel that way sometimes. But at the same time, it's no good saying, what do you mean you don't care about Russell Brand? You must be a bad person. It's like, no, you're the one who's now in a chat screaming at someone who you've never met because he hasn't expressed the same exact empathy that you have. But it's also important because it shows that in weighing up this trial, you're impartial, and because you don't care either way and you're honest.
It's true. And Andrew, it is one of the things I love about YouTube is YouTube does give an opportunity for people to try and be the authentic person they are when the camera's off, and try to be that same person in front of the camera. And I always get myself in trouble when I use examples or whatever, but just two examples that for some reason come to mind that I consider on opposite ends of the political spectrum. Ethan in the H3H3 podcast says some horrible shit, but he's just being himself, and you can love him or hate him. He's got a huge audience. Joe Rogan says some crazy, gets criticized for saying some crazy stuff sometimes. He's been the exact same person on camera. You can pretty much tell. I believe he's the same person on camera that he is off camera. And love him or hate him, you're getting authenticity. And, Ethan, I think Ethan's kind of a weirdo, but love him or hate him, you're getting authenticity. And I do think that is one thing YouTube, a great opportunity that YouTube has given a lot of people, and given the audience an opportunity to see people who are at least being the same person on camera that they are off camera. That's the kind of content I love to watch. I'll watch someone I don't agree with, but I love watching them be, they're being authentic. I just love the fact that you're being authentic, even though I disagree with half the shit you say. For me, that's a fun viewer experience. I wonder do you think Russell Brand is the same guy on camera as he is off camera?
Yeah, that's what I was just thinking as you were saying. I was just wondering what I really think about that. One of the things I found while researching this book is that most of us do tend towards honesty. And that is why people can get away with some pretty mad stuff. I found some weird examples, but I'll go into those in another time. But people getting away with things where they're just lying and everyone's like accepting it, because we expect people to be honest. And I know everyone's going, what do you mean people lie all the time? But the reason that those stories make the newspapers and the news and everything, when people have big politicians have lied, is because they are the exception, not the norm. Most people are honest, not because we're such great people, but because we know that if we're honest, we'll probably get further. If we lie, we'll probably be caught out. Some people are very good at lying, and they know that that's going to get them further. So Russell Brand was very good at playing the authentic role. The problem with this whole authenticity thing with YouTube is that you start to learn how to play the game. So many of us, maybe Joe Rogan, we don't know about any of them, but maybe Rogan, maybe that Ethan guy, maybe you and me, maybe you and I are like this, right? Maybe this is like our authentic selves, and maybe most people are. But there's always going to be that 1% of psychopaths. And I imagine among the elite, which Russell Brand was, the mainstream elite, I know people don't want to say that, but he was. And among this super successful, that's got to be higher than 1%. I'm imagining 5 or 10%. So maybe one out of every 10 or 20 of these YouTubers who seem just as authentic as the rest of us off camera are not like that. They know how to do it. I did a YouTube course like a year and a half ago. And I remember I was just shocked at looking at how it was basically teaching you how to become a cult leader. And it was saying, lesson number 1, non-believers, right? Talk about the bad guys, which is like the Jehovah's Witness would call them the worldly people. Scientology, that word got me in trouble before, but it's WOG. Got me in trouble with the yellow button on YouTube because it can also be a slur against other people. So that's another thing. But the enemy, there has to be the enemy. Rituals, be free. That's Russell Brand at the end of every single time is like, but the one most important thing is be free. This is him doing a culty thing. He knows what he is doing. He's becoming a spiritual leader. He ticks off every single one of those boxes, but those are what you're told to do as a YouTuber. You're incentivized to act like a cult leader to an extent. Now, that doesn't have to be a bad thing as long as you don't coerce your members to stay with you. So it's not always a bad thing, but it could mean that somebody as smart and talented as Russell Brand could fake some of that. I reckon it's somewhere between. Like, I'm sure that is him, and he does believe very strongly in the things he's talking about, and he does believe that he's helping the world and wants to help the world. Because people are like, they're not all good and all bad. I'm sure he feels like he's helping the world to some extent, and maybe he is. He's helped a lot of people with that stuff. At the same time, these victims who came forward said suddenly it was not the Russell I knew. Like, eyes just turned black and it was just nothing inside him. And that's scary. And I did a video about this the other day, that there's a whole bit in his autobiography about how he used to treat his dog, that he would like ask the dog to come over and be all nice with it, and then he'd suddenly like push it away and kick it and stuff like that, and then be nice to it. And a similar thing with some gerbils, and ended up killing the gerbils by accident and smashing a box on their head, but it fell on them somehow. And a lot of people got angry at me again, going like, oh, he was a kid. And that's fine, and that might be the case. But that is also one of the very, very first thing that clinicians look for in signs that somebody might be on the spectrum, so not necessarily full out, but on the spectrum of psychopathy. And that is in line with some of the stories that are corroborated of the accusers. So it's possible he falsifies some of his YouTube personality. It's possible a lot of it is real as well. It's never that black and white.
Yeah. I have to say, I think the reason why there's going to be a large degree of acceptance amongst his viewership or fans is you go, the guy's been talking about being a drug addicted sex addict for years and years and years. And there's only 4, even if you're like, there's 10, I'd be like, there's only 10. Are you shitting me? You've got hardcore drugs involved with sex addiction. This is exactly what we would expect from this guy. So I just think that's going to affect the degree of outrage. The outrage, if someone said, what's the media conspiracy? I don't know. Correct me if I'm wrong. First of all, I don't believe in a media conspiracy, but if there is a media conspiracy, I think it would be telling us we should be outraged. I go, what? That's exactly what I would expect from this guy. That's like, you're not generally outraged at something that is exactly what you would expect, but we're sort of being told you should be outraged. And I go, I don't know. It makes someone telling me that. I go, you're either dumb or you have an agenda, because I don't know that what you're talking about here with respect to this individual equals outrage. Charge him with a crime by all means, but outrage isn't the emotion that I would experience when being confronted with this information about Russell Brand.
Confronted with things we already knew and we laughed at and applauded the whole way through. Culture changes and people don't want to accept that sometimes. Things that were seen as okay, even if they weren't okay, but they were seen as okay in the 80s, 70s, are completely different to today. But what we don't realize is how quickly that all happened. I mean, the Me Too stuff was the last like 5 years. It completely changed. So, and anyone now thinking, no, it didn't, it wasn't like that, just go back and watch Russell literally talking about the things he is being accused of doing and laughing. And you can say, oh, they thought he was joking, and go, did they though? I don't think people thought Russell was joking. I think they believed it.
I saw a clip of him on a talk show where he pulled one of the other guests who was an attractive woman wearing a form-fitting clothing. He pulled her over to him and she was sort of fighting in a funny way, but still sort of fighting. And he pulled her onto his lap, and it was extremely uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Now, even that woman has come forward and said, "Oh, stop it! It was a joke. It was funny. There was no harm meant." And you go,
well, she doesn't want to be a victim.
Exactly. But that's what I'm saying is he was doing it on camera for what he did technically, if she didn't laugh it off, would have been assault technically.
Yeah.
It's on camera.
Did you see the bit where he offered up his assistance to Jimmy Savile?
I heard about it, but I haven't seen the video.
It's an audio, it's a radio bit, and he's interviewing Jimmy Savile. And again, it all depends on whether you believe that Russell Brand might not have known about Savile's actions at that time, because a lot of people in the BBC, a lot of these big like actors and TV presenters did at least have an inkling. Rumors were abound. And it's just like, again, people are going, oh, he's joking. But if that's your sister, if that's your mother, if it's you, if it's anyone just going into work, just want to have a normal day, and your normal day consists of being imagined naked by Jimmy Savile and being sort of offered up to him as though Russell Brand is your PIMP. It's not on, but we have to take some responsibility, because we laughed, we applauded, we clapped, we thought this was good, we thought this was fine and funny, and he's probably not doing it, maybe he is, but he was having sex with 80 women a month. That's what he claims anyway. So again, to your point, a lot of people are going, well, that's like 1,000 women a year, and only for like 10 years. So we're talking about 10,000 women. I'm sure it's not quite that high, but let's imagine 1,000 at least, several thousand, and only 4 have come forward. That's what some people are imagining and saying. So, but it only has to be one, right? You could be like, I got into fights with 10,000 people, but I only killed one. Well, you still go to prison for killing that one.
Yeah. Exactly. It's not to minimize the actual reality of what he did. It's just, I guess it's the media telling you, and you should be shocked, and you should be horrified, and you should be outraged. And I go, you're stupid. Like, you should have known this was going on. I mean, it took you 4 years to put this story together. It should have taken you 4 hours. What are you talking about?
Should we go to a couple of questions?
Sure.
Let's see. Okay, so I've got Celix the Fat. Thank you, Celix. Do you think that the woke and anti-woke rhetoric that is so prevalent nowadays is being hijacked to defend crimes that would be otherwise repulsive in anyone's mind? In other words, is R and SA being politicized? Aaron?
I think those two things are not the same thing. Hold on. Do you think the woke and anti-woke rhetoric is so prevalent nowadays that it's being hijacked to defend crimes? I'm having trouble thinking of examples where woke or anti-woke is being hijacked to defend crimes. Well, actually, let me say, because I called out Jake Shields in a video I did earlier this week, I've spent a little bit of time going through his Twitter feed. Now, Jake Shields is not representative of the world at large, but I look at Jake Shields because I'm just processing your question here. I think he is an example of someone who is using anti-woke rhetoric to justify and defend what you're talking about. I just hesitate to use someone like Jake Shields as representative of some larger group. But we could probably say he's at least a member of some group. Dude, I think everything is politicized. I think everything is an agenda. I think we're being manipulated. So again, it sounds like I'm talking about a conspiracy. This is just the way the media and the information, I call it the information business. It's a business. We know this from being on YouTube. The more views you get, the more money you make. That is just the way this world works. So, and when you're running a media institution for 20, 50, 100 years, nothing drives views like outrage. And to be honest, it's one of the things that I remember a few years ago when Russell Brand started becoming this kind of a new age YouTube guru, is he was calling that out, and he was calling it out very effectively, I think. But he was almost riding the outrage wave against the media outrage wave, right? Yeah. So it's still the same type of thing. So I guess, Celix, I'm giving there's no simple one answer to that question, but I think I've sort of answered it. Yeah,
I agree though, and I know what Celix is. I've just realised it was Felix the cat that's changed to Celix the fat. I get it. So I see what they mean, because I think it is politicized now, and we've gone sometimes from believe all women, which was, I suppose, if we're going to use words like woke and anti-woke, because people get really angry when I use those words, but it's in the comments. I'm just responding to the comment. Johnny, sorry, I was going back to Johnny Depp, but we've gone from believe all women, and people don't like that because believe all women is supposed to be woke. So if you're anti-woke, you overcorrect and you go believe all men now, right? And then we had Johnny Depp. There's Marilyn Manson right now. People aren't sure about what's happened. I don't know enough about that at all. But I know that Johnny Depp was at first seen as a pariah, and then gradually Amber Heard's story started to not really live up to scrutiny. And then she became the bad person. So people are like, you see, all these women are like. So you easily go from the woke thing to the anti-woke thing. And I think what people need to be doing is to just be going, take a breath. These people do not represent me. I do not know them. Johnny Depp does not represent me. Amber Heard does not represent me. Danny Masterson. None of these people do. Let's listen to some nuanced, balanced discussion. If we don't want this world of outrage and anti-woke and pro-woke and all this stuff, if we just want to actually listen to some intelligent conversation, and if people watched that, I know that's a bit naive of me, then that would actually incentivize more YouTubers and the mainstream media to have more nuanced discussions. The problem is right now, even though many of you might be watching this going, but I do like nuanced discussion, and that's why you follow such great YouTubers such as Aaron and myself, if more people did that and didn't just go for the outrage stuff, then we wouldn't have to package it that way. People wouldn't have to package it that way. They wouldn't be incentivized towards doing it. I'm not suggesting that many media people are like going, mwahaha, we're going to do outrage. I think what happens is you have a confirmation bias, you have some cognitive dissonance. Part of you knows that if you're outraged by things, it will get more clicks, and you sort of ignore that, but keep it at the back of your head. And that influences how you then frame things. You don't think you're doing it, but you do. So, yeah.
I have to jump in about 10 minutes.
Yep. Okay. Cool. Let's see. Rachel says, love you two on screen together. Just need relatable Reese and it would be a perfect show. Crimes of Church of Scientology and cover-ups need to be held accountable. I've got relatable Reese coming on in a few days. That's exciting, isn't it, Aaron?
Oh, you're going to have fun. She'll be great.
Oh, that's exciting. Let's see. Soggy Biscuit. I haven't even read these yet. I'm just clicking them. Have a good friend accused. Oh no, I put the thing up on the screen. The word. Wait, hang on. I'll get that. I'll get to Eleanor's one in a second. Soggy Biscuit said, have a good friend accused of R who was finally cleared after 2 years. His life was destroyed. Sorry, 20 years on, devalues accusations. Me too is bad.
See, look, that's an important comment because so much of how we feel about things is informed by our own personal experience in our lives or the lives of our friends. If I had a friend whose life had been destroyed for 2 years due to false accusations,
oh yeah,
I'd be like Jake Shields on Twitter, probably. I'd probably sound like I hate all women. Like I'd probably be so mad that someone close to me suffered that you'd see that pendulum swinging a little bit too far. So I understand that. I really do.
Yeah. We are moved by our own biases, and we all have them. Everyone has them. Everybody watching this right now is extremely biased about one thing or another. And the thing is, it's very hard to know what your bias necessarily is. I always think about these two things that don't work together. Like, so one of them is everything that I feel quite passionate about in terms of like my political views or whatever, that I feel like I'm definitely right about those because I just feel so strongly and I can't even see what's wrong with the things I think. It must be right. But I also know that I can't be the only person in the world out of 8 billion people who is the one guy who's right about everything. So I must be wrong, seriously wrong, about a lot of my beliefs. And I have no idea which ones.
Well, Andrew, it's one of the reasons I have a rule on my channel where I just don't talk about politics. It doesn't mean I don't have any political beliefs, but it means just because I believe something doesn't mean that has to be the most best version of that belief. Like just because I believe something doesn't mean I believe it so strongly that I have to enforce it on others. It's okay for it just to be my belief.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. Yeah, people trying to force beliefs on people. Do you have an example of a media conspiracy?
I'd be hard pressed. I mean, do I? Oh no, none that wouldn't be political. So I'm not going there.
I'm just asking while you're talking. I'm stalling for time while I put it into chat GPT. I actually do have an example, everybody. Operation Mockingbird. Don't you remember? You see, in the late 1940s, the Central Intelligence Agency, which is the CIA, I realize, as I read this out, which I'm not really, it's just one I've got off the top of my mind, began a covert project called Operation Mockingbird. The primary aim was to recruit American journalists and use major US media outlets to spread and promote the agency's views. So there you go. That's one.
Yeah.
Happy, Eleanor Ackerton?
Whether you're on the left or on the right now, you can think of a media conspiracy.
Yeah, it must happen. There's also just like shills and things. I mean, there's people. There was that movie, wasn't there, with Russell, not Brand, Crowe, and cigarettes. What was that?
Yes.
Crowe, cigarettes.
The
tobacco.
Informant? Was it The Informant?
The Insider.
Oh, so close.
So was that based on a true story? You decide.
That wasn't a media conspiracy though. That was like an industry conspiracy, right? That was about the tobacco industry.
Well, there must be some people who are in the media who get these calls from people. I just watched that movie last night. I went to the cinema to watch. Is it called Dumb Money? Have you heard of that?
I haven't seen a movie in a while in the theaters.
Yeah. Get out more, mate, to go inside and watch a movie. Dumb Money. Yeah, it was about this, the power of YouTube, really. That's why I wanted to go and watch it. It's Seth Rogen and Paul Dano, and Paul Dano's character is, he's a YouTuber and Reddit star. And
really?
Down on his luck. And it's a true story. It's based on a true story. Apparently, it doesn't really live up to it's not that true. It's made quite movie-ish. And he gets involved. He's not doing very well, but he is convinced that this very old-fashioned kind of stock, it was like a retailer game, should do well. So he goes on Reddit and he's like, hey, we should all put money in this thing. And then everyone does. And all the big stockbroker people are betting against it in something called a short squeeze.
Oh, it's the GameStop. It's the GameStop stock thing. Okay.
Yeah. And in that case, okay, maybe I don't know if there's a media conspiracy, but those kinds of things it's a conspiracy whereby the big guys who have so much money will put influence on people. They will do that. And I do wonder if that's what's happening with Dame Caroline Dinage when she's trying to push Rumble. There are links with Dinage. I hate to do the conspiracy stuff, I hate to do that because we just don't know, and I don't want to put out stuff that we don't know. I don't want to even be that guy who goes, interesting, isn't it? Because we don't know. But she has received money from Google before, and she's now sort of trying to get Rumble to not be the only access to Russell Brand, because obviously YouTube has an interest in, if they are going to demonetize Brand, that their competitor doesn't do well out of it and get loads of more subscribers. So
it's
there you go,
though, isn't it?
Yeah. Soggy Biscuit says Masterson guilty in court of law, Brand guilty in court of gold. I've got my own court, Aaron. Isn't that great? But I'm not taking away his liberty. I've actually campaigned. Well, I say campaigned. I'm shouting for him to have his liberty until proven otherwise.
Exactly.
God. There we go. I would just last one here. Big Dude says, Andrew, your moderators piss me off, but I respect your considered point of view. Well done. Don't let anyone compromise your views. Look, I don't know about my moderators, but I made them moderators because they had been with me a long time and I wanted to say thank you so much. I don't really want people to moderate too much, because if you start deleting some people's very abusive, horrible comments, people will ask, why have you not deleted these other ones? And it starts to get political. So it's a whole issue. Aaron, any thoughts before riding off into the sunset?
No, not really. But I do want to say moderator stuff. On my channel, just to keep down some of the bullshit in the live chat, you can put words on the banned list. Like, in other words, any comments that have these words, the comments just don't even show up. And I put Trump and Biden on my banned list. I do not care what you think about Trump or Biden in my live chat. Go do that shit somewhere else. It's not why we're here.
Wow. You know what? Even though I get I probably get into the politics slightly more than you do, but not much more, for the same reasons. I think it's boring. I think it's really boring. They're all crooks. Why would you try and lead a country if you were not? There wasn't something wrong with you. Who knew someone at high school who would who would end up going on to be like, I'm gonna probably rule the entire country? You've got to be a weirdo. You can't be normal. They're all horrible. So there you go. Anyone watching on my stream, go and click on Aaron's stream on his channel and just let it play on mute for the whole way through, and click like on that. Come over to mine, please, and do the same thing if you want us to succeed. If you don't, then just hate on us. But go to Growing Up in Scientology. It's brilliant. My thing's Andrew Gold. Come over. We both do loads of stuff about cult dynamics and Scientology and stuff like that. And I think that's all, isn't it?
This has been a blast, man. Let's do it. Let's do it more often.
Let's do it more often. Keep watching our shows. We're putting stuff here, end screens. Both of us are probably. So click on the things. Cool.